Hello, dear students, welcome back to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu newspaper analysis. So today is 30th May 2024 and here I've come up with few very interesting and very important articles for today's discussion. So without any delay, let's try to discuss all those important articles. But we have one important exercise before discussing them. Now the exercise is practicing some prelims based questions. And yesterday I've given you one question with respect to the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. As I've already told you that this particularly vulnerable tribal groups as a question is very important, whether it is with respect to prelims examination or mains examination perspective also, because when we talk about the mains examination in general studies paper 2, there is a topic or there is a syllabus topic called social justice, and the particularly vulnerable tribal groups may be asked in the mains examination as part of the social justice. Now the question is, consider the following statements about the particularly vulnerable tribal groups or PVTGs of India. And the first statement here, PVTGs reside in 18 states and 1 union territory of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And this is absolutely true that the PVTGs reside in 18 states and 1 union territory, that is Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and therefore this statement is absolutely correct. And the second statement says that PVTGs are neither constitutional nor statutory categories, and this is also absolutely correct because there was no constitutional recognition for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Even though they are part of the tribals, the scheduled tribes are recognized by the constitution, but the particularly vulnerable tribal groups do not have any statutory backing or constitutional backing, and therefore this statement is absolutely correct. And the third statement, for the comprehensive development of particularly vulnerable tribal groups, the PM Janman or Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan was launched in the Union Budget of 23-24. And this statement is also absolutely correct, and therefore the correct answer for this question is C, all three. We have also discussed about this PM Janman scheme that was launched by the Union government as part of the development of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now, if you look at the scheduled tribe population in India, scheduled tribes constitute around 10 crore population. Now, within scheduled tribes, there are certain other category of scheduled tribes who are considered as more backward, and they very often live in the remote forest areas. Now we have a vast forest lands, and there are certain tribal communities who lives in the remotest areas of a country, and they also have the low socio-economic development, and the health indicators are also very poor, and they also suffer from the high vulnerability compared to the other tribal groups or communities. And these tribal communities who have been facing extreme vulnerability due to various other challenges, so they are categorized as the particularly vulnerable tribal groups in India. Now, how many particularly vulnerable tribal groups are there in India? There are 75 identified PVTGs are there across different states. How many states? 18 states and 1 union territory. And these 75 particularly vulnerable tribal groups reside in 18 states, and you can see and also go through all the states where PVTGs actually reside. And in fact, the highest number of PVTGs reside in Orissa. So there are 13 different groups of or communities of PVTGs lives in Odisha. And in fact, when we talk about the Union Territory, Andaman and Nicobar Islands as a Union Territory also holds the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. In Andaman, there are 5 different groups of PVTGs, and followed by Odisha, Andhra Pradesh actually have 12 different groups of particularly vulnerable tribal groups, right? So they do not come under either constitutional or statutory categories, and therefore the second statement is correct. And in fact, the government recently made efforts to recognize the socio-economic backwardness and the vulnerabilities of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, and in this regard, the government has launched Pradhan Mantri PVTG Development Mission. So this is known as Pradhan Mantri PVTG Mission, right? So this particular mission actually envisions the holistic development of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now, as part of the Pradhan Mantri PBTG development mission, the government has launched PM Janman program. Now, Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan program. Now, this PM Janman Yojana program actually provides housing, sanitation, electricity, connectivity. All the basic facilities will be extended to the particularly vulnerable tribal groups and thereby reducing their vulnerabilities. And in fact, this also covers education and healthcare of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So I hope you have understood about this particularly vulnerable tribal groups and the question also. Now we'll move on to the today's practice question. The question is also very important question because Middle East or West Asia is one of the focus areas of the UPSC whenever it is asking prelims questions, and therefore you need to master the map based questions in the Middle East or West Asia. And the question is, consider the following statements or following places or countries. First, Mediterranean Sea, Jordan, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And Syria, which is part of West Asia or Middle East, has borders with how many of the above countries or regions? So please answer this question in the comment section and I will provide you the correct answer in the comment section. So please also go through the map so that you can understand where is Syria located and how many countries Syria actually sharing its borders with, whether it is sharing its border with Mediterranean Sea or not. So please try to answer this question in the comment section and correct answer also I'll be providing you in the comment section. So without any delay, let's try to discuss all important articles and editorials which are given in the Hindu newspaper. Now the first article is with respect to open access is crucial for self-reliance in science. And in fact, in recent times, India has been making rapid strides in the field of science and technology. However, in the area of science and technology, access to scientific journals is very important, along with developing and strengthening the scientific infrastructure in various research institutes across the country. However, the problem is that there is a lack of open access to these scientific journals, and at the same time, the higher cost of scientific journals have been resulted in a roadblock for the self-reliance in science for India. Now we'll try to understand what are the shortcomings, what are the roadblocks and constraints for the rapid growth and development of science and research in India. Because for any country, its emphasis on science and technology, its emphasis on research is very crucial. So it is true that India spends around 0.67% of its GDP on research and development. However, it is very low compared to several other advanced and developed countries. However, over a period of time, it is expected that we spend most of our resources on research and development. So that will help us in achieving holistic development in going forward. We'll briefly understand the context of this article. So the context is that this particular editorial is talking about India's scientific progress. So what kind of a scientific progress that India has made in recent times? And also, in order to ensure or in order to further work on the scientific progress, open access to the scientific literature is very important because it ensures the self-reliance in the science. Because as a country, India need to emphasize on self-reliance in science, indigenization of research. So that is very important here. Right? So therefore, access to scientific literature will help us achieve self-reliance in the field of science and research and development. However, it also highlights the significance of equitable access to the resources. There is no doubt that we have resources, but the problem is that there is lack of equitable access to the resources, and at the same time, there are also various challenges which actually faced by the current academic institutes or academic landscape. Now we'll understand what are the major challenges, major roadblocks, and why the resources are not equitably shared between different individuals, and what should be the appropriate course of action. Now we'll briefly understand the state of scientific research in India. So what exactly is the state of scientific research? We'll be understanding in this particular article. Now, if you look at the recent progress that India has made in the field of science and technology and research and development, so we can categorize India as one country which has made a significant strides in the field of science and technology. And in fact, it is we are proud that India is the third largest globally in total research output and 11th in terms of quality. So this data was published by Nature Index. So according to this Nature Index data, India is the third largest country in the world in terms of research output and 11th largest in terms of quality of that research output according to the Nature Index data. However, the problem is that ease of doing science, or ease of, when we talk about ease of doing business, in a similar way, every country should actually have a lesser regulations that would further promote the ease of doing science. This ease of doing science in India is hampered by lack of infrastructure and lack of resources. Even if we have the resources, the inequitable distribution of resources is a major roadblock. Inequitable distribution of resources is a major roadblock that we are facing here. And in fact, when we talk about the institutes and universities which actually promote or cultivate the research and development across the country, there is a significant increase in the number of universities across the country. For example, in 2014, we just have 760 universities. But in 2021, we have 1,113 universities. Now, this is not a small increase in the number of universities, but despite there is a number of universities increase, the problem is that these universities lacking necessary infrastructure. So they also lack the essential resources to undertake research and development, to undertake projects in science. So when we talk about lack of infrastructure, lack of resources in these universities, we specifically talk about instrumental access was lacking. There were also no sophisticated labs. Sophisticated labs are very, very important to undertake research in any field. So these sophisticated labs were absent, and instrumental access was also lacking, and there is also no access to the scientific literature across these universities. And in fact, these are the major hurdles which are being faced in research and development in our country. However, so we very often come across an initiative in the field of research and development and science and technology, that is iSTEM initiative. Right? What exactly is this iSTEM initiative? So this iSTEM initiative was launched, and it is essentially aimed at bridging the resources gap. For example, if there are no resources, or if there are resources but there is a poor utilization of those resources, so the existing resource gaps will be identified by the iSTEM initiative, and it will bridge the existing resource gap by cataloging all publicly funded research facilities nationwide, and at the same time making them available to researchers based on their own need. So that is the iSTEM initiative in the field of science and technology. Right? So, but the problem with Indian science and research is that there is an issue of access to scientific literature. Right? For example, there are a number of scientific journals are being published across the world, but the problem is that the researchers very often lack access to the scientific journals, and in fact they have the access to the scientific journals that would bring the further improvement and further sophistication in their research. But the problem is that these scientific journals are very often very costly, highly expensive. So that is one of the major challenge that the Indian scientific community has been facing. However, recently we have heard about this one nation, one subscription concept. So this one nation, one subscription concept actually aims to make the scientific journals universally available to all publicly funded institutions in India. Okay, so whatever scientific journals which are being published in various fields which are made available by this one nation, one subscription project. However, the problem is that in order to access all these scientific journals or commercial journals, so we need to incur a lot of costs, because these commercial journals are very often highly expensive. And in fact, according to some data, Indian institutes, especially the science research institutes and universities, have been spending around 1500 crore rupees annually on these scientific journals. So we must address this problem. In order to address this problem, these scientific journals must be available for the all researchers as part of open access policy. Now, when these scientific journals are available for all the researchers, then the Indian scientific community or institutes and universities would significantly cut down the cost on these scientific journals, and this expenses or this money can be used in a much more efficient manner to develop the existing facilities in research institutes and universities. And after that, the subscription also very often having a limited reach or limited access, because the benefits of the subscription are very often reaped by only few individuals or few top institutes, and these benefits are very often not extended to the different other institutes or different other individuals, and therefore this has been resulting in leaving many others or many other researchers without having access to the crucial scientific literature. See, when all researchers have access to the scientific literature, which is very, very crucial in the field of research and development, then we can expect that those scientific literature will actually help everyone in an equitable manner. But now there is no equity in the access of the scientific literature to the scientific community, and that is also one of the major issue in access of scientific literature. And apart from that, there are number of publishers who publish these scientific journals. So how about having negotiations or talks with these publishers to ensure the easy access of these scientific journals for all research community in an equitable manner? And in fact, the government is currently negotiating with 5 major commercial publishers of these scientific journals who dominated the existing market to implement this one nation, one subscription plan that will ensure that all research institutes and universities will have access to the scientific journals, and that could also significantly cut down the cost. Now, you can also clearly see the scientific policies that were launched in India at different times, and there is also open access. Open access actually means, for example, there is a scientific journal, and these scientific journals published by some research institute or research scholars, and these scientific journals should be easily or openly accessible for everyone across the globe, and that is open access. And open access is very often having implications also. Now, what sort of implications, or what kind of implications it is having? So in fact, according to some data, a significant number of scholarly articles which are published in this scientific journals are available through this open access. Okay, so most of the scholarly articles published by the scientists are available in the open access. Now, open access in the sense that everyone can easily access these documents, these scientific journals, and in fact, which provides free online access. The open access actually provides free online access to various or different other articles, and the fraction of open access publications also significantly increased across the globe. So earlier it was 38% of open access articles from the scientific journals. Now it has significantly increased to 50% in 2022, and in fact it is a good news that now most of the researchers, institutes and universities can access the scholarly articles through the open access. And in fact, there is also an international push for open access because it is benefiting the global community and particularly the global research community. And because of that reason, there is also an international push for the open access. So as part of this international push, there are a lot of countries which have been making it mandatory to publish the scholarly articles openly so that everyone will have access to these articles. For example, countries like US, European Union, and as well as a lot of philanthropic funding resources or sources. So they also mandating that this open access for the research that they fund. For example, imagine that a Wellcome Trust, which is a philanthropic funding source, and it mandated that if they fund any research, the details of the research should be openly available for the other researchers so that they can also build on that, they can also improve on that. So we can say that there is also a continued increasing international push for this open access of data. However, now there is no doubt this open content or free content is significantly and rapidly increasing across the globe, across the world. And that necessity and efficiency of paying for a unified costly subscription like one nation, one subscription is being questioned. Now this one nation, one subscription also involves that we have to pay a certain amount of money, and according to some data, the Indian institutes have been paying around 1500 crore for the subscription of these scientific data or scientific journals. Now, when these open access scholarly articles and scientific journals are openly available across the world and the number is increasing, this one nation and one subscription, which also resulting in incurring a lot of expenses, is being questioned in recent times. However, there are certain challenges, and along with these challenges there are solutions also. So when we talk about these challenges, what kind of challenges that we usually face? And as per the recent study, which found that approximately 28% of the academic journal articles are actually unpreserved, right? So scholarly articles and scientific journals or any other articles from these journals which are not preserved, when those articles are not preserved, they will face the risk of vanishing from the internet. So they vanish away from the internet, and in fact it is a very important and a very significant a resource for all the scientific community across the globe, because it provides a very important and key inputs on various aspects. And therefore we need to make sure that these articles, scholarly articles and journal articles must be preserved in the internet so that everyone can have access to these articles. However, recently there was another concept called green open access is also been developing in this scientific community. And this green open access actually allows the authors of these scientific journals to deposit a version of their work in the university repository. Okay, so whoever writes these scientific journals, so they must deposit a version of their work in a university repository, and hence making it freely available or accessible to everyone across the world. And in fact, Indian funding agencies have mandated green open access for a long time, but enforcement has been facing a lot of challenges. So I hope you have understood this green open access. Now, green open access actually means, for example, any scholarly article is published in a journal, in a scientific journal. Now, before publishing that particular article, he or she must deposit their work in the university repository, a version of their work in the university repository. So therefore, everyone can freely access the work across the globe. So earlier also India has made that green open access is mandatory, but there are a lot of challenges in the implementation of green open access. So because most of the researchers they're not intended to share their research findings with the others. So that is the problem here, and that has been creating a lot of challenges in the enforcement of this green open access. And after that, there is also self-reliance in the scientific publishing is very, very important for like country like India, because now we are looking for a self-reliance in research and development, science and technology. So in this context, we should also achieve self-reliance in the scientific publishing. So to become self-reliant, what we have to do? So we have to improve our own journal system, the scientific journal system, the scholarly articles. And at the same time, there should be no burden of payment to the authors or the readers. And that is very, very important, because it ensures access of these scientific journals to everyone. And at the same time, so with the capabilities in digital technology, India should also become a pioneer for the global south, because India is very often perceived itself as a leader of global south, and in fact India can navigate the global south in these scientific journals and scholarly articles. And at the same time, India could also share the digital public infrastructure for low cost, high quality scientific publishing. And in fact, this is a win-win situation for all the countries, and especially countries in the global south. And India will have the opportunity to play the leadership role in this. We'll move on to the next very important article. So that is Amrut scheme. Now Amrut scheme actually means that Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation is Amrut scheme. Now this Amrut scheme is aimed at improving the urban infrastructure across the country in line with the 74th Constitutional Amendment. I hope all of you knew about the 74th Constitutional Amendment. And the 74th Constitutional Amendment talks about the urban governance, right? So urban governance is provided in the 74th Constitutional Amendment. And in fact, Indian cities have been facing a lot of challenges. Now I'll list out few challenges. They include pollution, traffic congestion, and development of slums, traffic congestion and development of slums across these urban areas. And at the same time, the increasing vulnerability of these urban centers to various disasters, for example floods, heat waves. So that is also a major challenge, because recently Delhi has experienced around 52 degrees Celsius. And apart from that, these urban areas also have a limited infrastructure. They very often facing the water stress or water scarcity across different parts, and poor living conditions of the people, unemployment. All these problems are being faced by the people who are living in the urban areas. And it is expected that this Amrut mission will improve the urban infrastructure, especially with respect to the infrastructure, right? Now we'll try to discuss this very briefly. So around 36% of India's population living in cities by 2047. Okay, so according to some data, it is expected that 36% of India's population will live in urban areas by 2047, and it will become 50% going ahead. Now, according to the 2011 data on urbanization and number of people who are living in these urban areas, it is said that 29% of India's population are living in these urban areas, and 71% of the population are living in the rural areas. And apart from that, recently World Bank has also provided some data on the development of the urban centers and the financial requirements. So it is said that the World Bank has estimated that around $840 billion are required to fund the bare minimum urban infrastructure over the next 15 years. And in fact, this is a huge amount for a country like India. So if we wanted to develop at least minimum infrastructure in urban areas, we need to spend around $840 billion in the next 15 years. Now in this context, in the context of all these challenges, in the context of growing population in urban areas, in the context of declining living standards for the people, so the Amrut mission was launched. So Amrut is Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation scheme was launched by the Union government in June 2015. And in fact, its second version, that is Amrut 2.4, version was launched by the Union government in 2021 to build on the success of Amrut 1.0. Now, what is this Amrut scheme and what are the major aims and objectives of this Amrut scheme? We'll try to understand this as well. So in fact, the Amrut mission was drawn to cover around 500 cities and towns with a population of over 1 lakh with notified municipalities. So for example, imagine that there are towns and municipalities with more than 1 lakh population will be covered under this Amrut mission. So around 500 cities and towns are being covered under this Amrut program. And what was the basic purpose of this Amrut mission? So the purpose of Amrut mission is to ensure that every household have access to the tap with assured supply of water and even the sewerage connection. Now this is drinking water and sanitation will be provided or further built through this Amrut mission in the urban areas, right? And apart from that, the purpose of the Amrut program is also to increase the overall value of cities by developing greenery and well-maintained open spaces such as parks and other green spaces. And at the same time, reduce pollution by switching to public transport, right? Now, due to excess traffic or traffic congestions, the urban areas very often facing the problem of pollution because increased private vehicles of urban households. When urban people starts adopting the public transportation system, and there is a probability that that would significantly reduces the levels of pollution in the urban areas. And in fact, the Amrut program actually facilitates the mass rapid urban transports and transit system. So this mass rapid urban transport and transit system will significantly reduce the urban pollution. And at the same time, this is actually revamping the urban infrastructure that could reduces the levels of pollution. However, the early total outlay for the Amrut program by the Union government was 50,000 crore for 5 years from 2015-16 to 2019-20. However, so Amrut 2.0 was, as I have already told you, that the Union government launched Amrut 2.0 in the year 2021. And this particular program was aimed to build on the previous success of Amrut 1.0. And therefore, this Amrut 2.0 aimed at making cities water secure. So potable drinking water will be provided to the every urban household. Now, in fact, urban areas have also been facing water stress or water crisis. And recent example being the Bangalore water crisis. And therefore, Amrut 2.0 program will focus on providing functional water tap connection to all households in the statutory towns. So remember that under Amrut program, 500 towns or municipalities with a population of more than 1 lakh will be selected. And apart from that, there are certain ambitious targets which were also set up under this Amrut 2.0 program. So one such ambitious target was providing 100% sewerage management in these 500 Amrut cities also. And Amrut 2.0 also has its own financial outlay. So this financial outlay of Amrut 2.0 is allocated 2,99,000 crore for 2.0 program, with the central outlay of being 76,760 crore for 5 years term. And the rest of the amount will be mobilized by the state governments and at the same time the cities on their own. However, when we talk about the reality of the urban areas in India, it is actually estimated that about 2 lakh people die every year due to number of problems or number of challenges in these urban areas. For example, people have been dying due to inadequate water, sanitation and hygiene, excess amounts or excess levels of pollution. So all these factors are major causes of increasing mortality and morbidity in these urban centers. And in fact, in 2016, the disease burden due to the consumption of unsafe water or utilization of the unsafe water, and even the sanitation related issues in these urban centers was 40 times higher than India compared to China. Okay, so these issues are 40 times higher in India than China. So especially the unsafe water and sanitation per person. So therefore, in this context, the Amrut program was launched, which focuses on drinking water, sanitation, sewerage management, everything with respect to the urban areas. So even after the introduction of this Amrut mission, there was not a significant improvement. And in fact, huge amounts of wastewater and little treatment enhances the vulnerability and incidence of these diseases. So there is no doubt that whenever the sewerage management system is mixed with the freshwater supply systems or pipelines, then of course it contaminates or pollutes the water, and that would result in various other diseases, and in fact it also increases the vulnerability of the people for various other diseases. And in fact, in India, we have 150 reservoirs which are being monitored by the central government every year. And these 150 reservoirs actually supply a drinking water and irrigation water to different parts of our country. And in fact, these 150 reservoirs are also very, very important for hydroelectricity production in our country. So because understand that in order to ensure energy security and in order to meet the growing demand of energy, we must focus on various other sources of energy generation, and hydroelectricity through this 150 reservoirs is one such way to generate electricity and also bridge the energy demand. So therefore, these 150 reservoirs were filled just 40% of its capacity weeks ago, and it is particularly concerning, right? So these reservoirs do not have the full capacity water. Okay, so there's no water in these reservoirs, but these reservoirs hold only 40% of their full potential. And if it further declines due to the summers and a wasteful consumption of water, then it will create a large scale water crisis across India. And in fact, the Niti Aayog has also rightly predicted that 40% of India's population will have no access to the drinking water by 2030. So this is what the Niti Aayog has predicted because of the unscientific consumption of water or usage of water without paying any heed to the water conservation or water harvesting. And in fact, around 21 major cities are going to run out of the groundwater in India. So this is also as per the estimate. And nearly 31% of the urban Indian households do not have the piped water, and 67% are not connected to a piped sewerage discharge system, and very often this will pollute the freshwater resources also, or contaminate the freshwater resources also, and again that would significantly increases the disease vulnerability of the people. And in fact, according to the data, the water quantity supplied to every individual, the average water supply per person in urban India is 69.25 liters per day, whereas the required amount of water for every person in urban areas is 135 liters. And therefore, the water which is being supplied to every urban household is less than what is needed, and this indicating that a growing water stress or water crisis. So that has to be dealt with in a very careful manner. And in fact, the government has also launched National Clean Air Program to deal with increasing pollution in these urban areas. Why? Because Amrut program mostly concentrated on providing fresh water or dealing with the sewerage system. It does not focus adequately on pollution management. For that particular purpose, the government has launched National Clean Air Program. However, there are certain flaws in the scheme, the Amrut 1.0 and Amrut 2.0. So what sort of flaws were existing in this particular program? See, most of the fundamentals of this particular scheme are erroneously constructed. Okay, so there are a lot of errors in the functioning of this particular program, and apart from that, instead of taking a holistic approach for the implementation of this program, so it is actually based on a project oriented attitude and even top down approach. Now this top down approach, generally the funds, policies or evaluation of the policies flow from the top level to the down level rather than emphasizing on the bottom up approach. Now in fact, the bottom up approach is a much more democratic approach, and it also involves the communities in the implementation of such programs, and therefore we must emphasize on this bottom up approach. And in fact, it is also said that the project is owned by the bureaucrats, parastatals and large technology based companies. And one such example, so which proving this particular fact, is that the governance architecture, the apex committee of this particular Amrit mission is headed by the Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and all the members who are non-elected. Since most of the members are non-elected, so that is a violation of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, and the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act deals with the governance of urban local bodies, because people's representatives were completely missing or absent in this governance of Amrit program. However, so what should be the way forward in this particular program? So the way forward should be, we must look for the nature-based solution for the better implementation of Amrit program, and at the same time we should also devise a comprehensive methodology with a people-centric approach, and we should also empower the local bodies in this particular process. Now understand that we must recognize the importance of the urban local bodies for better implementation of the Amrit program and also achieve the desired results. And the next very, very important article is with respect to Rudra M2, right? So this Rudra M2 that you are seeing here on this image is a air to surface missile flight. Okay, so this is air to surface missile, and that was recently tested by the Defense Research and Development Organization, and we'll understand what are the basic characteristic features of this air to surface missile. The Defense Research and Development Organization on Wednesday successfully flight tested the indigenously developed Rudra M2 air to surface missile. Okay, so from a Sukhoi 30 MKI jet off the coast of Odisha, right? So Defense Research and Development Organization has tested this Rudra M2 air to surface missile. Now air to surface missile in the sense that, for example, through an aircraft, it is taken to certain altitude and then it will be released to hit the targets on the ground. So that is the surface to air missile. And the other thing that you have to understand with respect to Rudra M2 missile is that it is an advanced version of Rudra missiles, and at the same time it is also indigenously developed missile. Okay, so this missile is tested from a platform of Sukhoi 30 MKI jet. And as I've already told you that this surface air to surface missile Rudra M2 is successfully tested, and this flight test met all the trial objectives. So whatever objectives that are desired to be fulfilled or that are desired to be achieved are fulfilled, and therefore it has also validated the propulsion system and control and guidance algorithms as well. So the performance of this missile has been validated from the flight data that has been captured by the range tracking instruments. And the successful test has consolidated the overall role of this Rudra M2 missile 2 as a force multiplier for the Indian Armed Forces, and it is going to play a very important and a very crucial role in the Indian Armed Forces. So when we talk about this Rudram or Rudram M2 missile or Rudram 2 missile, so this Rudram missile is India's first indigenously developed anti-radiation missile. Now when I say indigenously developed missile, that we have not imported this missile from any other country, rather our research institutes, defense research institutes have built this particular missile on their own, and that is why it is known as a first indigenously developed anti-radiation missile. missile. And this particular missile is designed to target the enemy ground radars, because it is air to surface missile, right? So this is air to surface missile, and since it is air to surface missile and it is delivered from certain altitude through a jet, in this case Sukhoi Yam-30 was used, and it hits the targets on the ground. It is designed to target the enemy ground radars, whatever radars that the enemy have on the ground, and even the communication stations as part of the suppression of enemy air defense missions. So when we talk about the Rudram 2 missile, so it is an advanced version of Rudram 1. So earlier there was a Rudram M missile, and Rudram 2 was the advanced version of Rudram 1 missile. And in fact this Rudram 1 missile was already tested 4 years ago. So when we talk about the range and speed of this Rudram 2 missile, so it is said that this Rudram 2 missile can pick up enemy radio frequencies and signals from the radars over a range of more than 100 kilometers. And in fact it also has a feature of lock on before and after the launch system. And it also possesses an internal guidance system, and this internal guidance system actually allows this Rudram 2 missile to direct itself towards the target post launch. So when it is being launched, the internal guidance system will guide it towards the enemy target. Now when we talk about the some of the special characteristic features of this Rudram missile, Rudram 2, is its altitude versatility. Now as altitude versatility in the sense that this missile can be launched from different altitudes. Remember that this is air to surface missile, and because of that reason, so it can be launched from different altitudes. And when we launch it from different altitudes, it is highly adaptable in different combat scenarios, lower altitude, higher altitude. So this altitude versatility making it more deadly in the combat scenarios. And this is all about this Rudram 2 missile. And next we'll try to discuss another very important article. So that is India to import wheat after 6 years to shore up reserves. Right now, understand that in a very few days we are about to start our Kharif season, right? So we are about to start our Kharif season. Now Kharif season starts from June and it up to September, right? So this is the Kharif season. And please tell me in the comment section, wheat is Kharif crop or Rabi crop? So please answer this question in the comment section. Wheat is Kharif crop or Rabi crop? Now recently the Indian government decided to shore up the wheat stock by allowing more and more import of wheat into the country, so thereby stabilizing the prices. So imagine that we have around 100 bags of wheat with us. However, there is a demand of 150 bags of wheat. Okay, so 150 bags of wheat required, but we have only 100 bags of wheat. Now in this case, what will happen? That the wheat prices would significantly increase because there is a more demand. So since wheat prices significantly increases and it is also a staple food for most of the Indians, so increasing commodity prices or increasing wheat prices will also increase inflation, and poor people cannot afford to buy the wheat. Okay, so I'm explaining this in a very small scale. So if government allows the import of wheat from other countries, then our stocks of wheat will also significantly increase, and that would lead to the declining prices of wheat in our country. Okay, so that is the objective, and India will begin wheat imports after 6-year gap. And this wheat import is actually focused on replenishing the depleted reserves and hold down the prices that leaped following 3 years of disappointing crop. And in fact, last 3 years we have the disappointing wheat crop, and because of the disappointing wheat crop, so the government has decided to import more wheat into a country. And in fact, earlier we used to import 40% import duty on the wheat. because wheat is imported in a higher number into the country. What happens? This significantly reduces the wheat prices, and thereby farmers will incur heavy losses if we import more wheat into our country. So therefore the government imposed 40% tax on the wheat imports, and it is also expected that the government will abandon the 40% tax on wheat imports. And therefore abandoning this particular move of the government will pave the way for, or it will provide a way for the private traders and even the flour millers to buy from the producers such as top exporters such as Russia. And as I've already told you that India, Russia and Ukraine are known as the wheat baskets of the world. Okay, so therefore the removal of this 40% tax on wheat imports will significantly increase wheat stocks in India. And in fact, it is also said that there is a compelling case for the removal of wheat import duty of 40%. So what was that compelling reason to removing or abandoning this 40% tax on wheat imports? So the considered view is that wheat import duty should be removed after June. Okay, so why? Because now Kharif season. So Kharif season will not grow a wheat here. Only during the Rabi season we cultivate wheat. So therefore, in order to meet the domestic requirement, it is very important that we need to have a certain amount of wheat stocks also. And also understand, in previous 3 years, consecutive years, there was a poor wheat yield. So all these factors have compelled the government to abandon the 40% tax on wheat imports, so that we can import more and more wheat into our country, and that would stabilize the prices of wheat. However, when we start cultivating or when we start sowing wheat, then the government will again impose this 40% tax on the import of wheat, so that the farmers will not incur heavy losses because of the excess import of wheat into our country. Okay, so the government also decided or determined to protect our farmers' interest, and the duty should be reinstated before the wheat planting starts in October. Now, I've already told you that Kharif season starts from June to September, and Rabi season starts from October to March, right? So wheat is a Rabi crop, and in fact, India also aims to store up a wheat reserves of 10 million tons. So we need to talk about the wheat harvesting in India also. So as I've already told you that wheat is a Rabi crop and it is being grown in the winter season, right? So this is being grown in a winter season and it is a Rabi crop. And sowing of wheat actually takes place in October to December, and harvesting of wheat takes place during February and May. And in India, the Indo-Gangetic plains are most conducive area in India for growing of wheat. Now most of the wheat is grown in this Indo-Gangetic plains, especially Haryana, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh and parts of Uttarakhand and even Bihar, Madhya Pradesh regions. So the cool winters and hot summers are the perfect conditions for the good wheat or bumper wheat crop. Okay, so this is briefly about the wheat crop and the conditions conducive for the cultivation of wheat crop and recent government's decision to import wheat into our country. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button, and thank you so much.